Tonight we are going retro. Join me as I explore the classic groovy sound of tube. Join me as I explore this. This N3 Ultra is pretty much similar in many ways to N3 Pro, except that it is of course larger, heavier by a few grams, and all the things that I marked in green there are some of the improvement that you can expect from this N3 Ultra. Now it is running on Android OS, which is Android 8.1, and which also means that it also brings some of the improvement, including quick charging, BD 3.0, and also on top of that, you're gonna get some other element like, which might be very important to some people, which is parametric equalizer. Also, not forgetting, this N3 Ultra now offers much higher resolution, maximum of native DSD at 512 and PCM of 768 kHz. So pretty much they double up from what was already offered in N3 Pro. Pretty much I would say that is maximum that you can expect from digital audio players nowadays. And not forgetting the usage factor. How does this N3 Ultra fares with battery? I have done some testing running on 4.4mm balance and running continuously in tube mode. I was able to get in excess of around 8 hours, just slightly over 8 hours, and pretty much spot on in alignment with what Cayin has claimed. Because if I were to compare with the N3 Pro, I was only able to score at best 7 hours. By the way, the only way to use this N3 Ultra, pretty much similar to N3 Pro, this is an offline only audio player. So which means that you can't do any kind of streaming here. So there's no Tidal, there is no Spotify, there is no Apple lossless. Okay, this is a pure hardcore local only playback device. Alright, let's just quickly have a look at the system itself. As I mentioned earlier, you're gonna get some feature because this is a stripped down Android to only provide this interface. So there's not even a home screen available. And here, this is where you do all the controls with the audio. Straightforward, simple stuff, PCM filters, okay? And you're gonna have some option here, which is all you can see here. And my comment on this is that after testing it for quite a while, changing between different filter, I will admit that it does not seem to be quite effective as compared to other DAP or even Dongle, which I have tested so far. Perhaps it is within the limitation of my hearing. I am not hearing any kind of audible differences at all. Parametric equalizer, yes. And alright, I will just admit openly, I am not an EQ person, but I can understand that this thing means a lot to many people, okay? Being able to adjust your audio and everything is meaningful. So this is definitely a good news. I have tried it and definitely it works. Assuming that you already attach your micro SD here, like what I did, and this is how it looked like. If you are familiar with Hebe Music app, then these are familiar interface to you, because this is essentially Hebe Music app, okay? Even the display here is the same, okay? The way you control everything with regard to playback is pretty much the same. Now let's find out how hot can it be, this N3 Ultra running exclusively on tube mode. As you can see here, it is fully lighted up for almost 2 hours already, driving this FIO FA19, my IEM here, which is very easy to drive from the 4.4mm balance, okay, here on high gain, driving local flag files. Let's just measure it up using this meter here. Okay, there you go. It is basically just over 40 C, and you have to remember it has been running for close to 2 hours in tube mode. I have been taking it outside, walking around, which I would say that fairly okay considering that we have 2 tubes inside. If you know anything about tubes, that they are not solid state, which means that they are prone to vibration. And that N3 Pro was already equipped with suspension system, which pretty much worked well, and that's pretty much how I would describe it, working well. Because if I were to put it like this in my pocket, and listening to my music here, and I walk around like I have shown you earlier, one of the key things which I observed with that N3 Pro was that, I'm getting a bit of microphonic, because being non-solid state, it means that there's some sort of, if there's any kind of movement, it might impact the sound. So you're gonna hear some pinging or something like that, which can be quite disturbing while listening to music. And this N3 Ultra does not exhibit that issue at all. So this is already super impressive, because one of the key reasons that you want to get this N3 Pro or Ultra is because it has tubes. Despite having 3 different type of sound profile, which is the solid state, the default one, you can also select tube, and within tube itself you can select either classic or modern. In general, the sound signature of this N3 Ultra remains consistent regardless of which profile you select. The difference being is that, the timbre temperament will change depending on which profile you select. So let me just explain a bit. So what is the sound signature of this N3 Ultra? It is a DAP, which I consider as being pretty much in alignment to the first N3 Pro. Warm sounding, fairly analytical, fairly musical, very well balanced being musical and analytical. So you're gonna get something which is pretty much similar to many other digital audio player which is already released in the market, especially those from the AKM side. So let me just quickly give you a comparison. You remember this FIO M23? This one runs on AK449 series as well. And I also have here, which is another AKM device, 449 series as well, which is FIO Q15. And another AKM device, which is my Sony PCM D100. The similarities that they share between all of them is that they all sounded analog. They are smooth. They are rich and dense with the sound texture itself. And you can expect the same thing from this N3 Ultra here. But I will try to describe some of the differences. For example, if I were to compare with this FIO M23, perhaps within the limitation of my hearing, I am hearing pretty much similar sort of sound coming from either one of them. Okay, even power-wise, timbre-wise, when running in solid state mode on this N3 Ultra. Okay, and the same can be said as well from this Q15. Perhaps I would even say that this Q15 offer a bit more of coloration on the lower mid-range or even on the lower frequency itself, and a bit smoother as well with the transient speed. So all in all, I would say that this N3 Ultra is definitely a very solid device. But then again, the biggest reason why you want to have this, the tube mode. This is where things changes, okay? Just imagine this, you already have this smooth, velvety sound of AKM, and now you turn on the tube mode, which now transform this N3 Ultra into a device which is so pleasingly musical to listen to, especially depending on what type of partner you attach it. For example, if I were to use something like this Sennheiser HD600 here, the kind of output that I'm getting is definitely more musical rather than analytical. In fact, it makes this HD600 kind of a bit warm sounding. And then I also connect it to my magnetic planar here, which is Sivga Nightingale. To me, this Sivga Nightingale is a favorite of mine because it is one of the few magnetic planar which I consider as being natively warm sounding, organic and analog. The combination of this and this, okay, ended up being super dense, rich with the sound texture, and yet again, I am hearing the same thing, pretty much consistent with what I am hearing from the Sennheiser HD600, which is, let's say, I do feel that I'm losing a bit more of resolution, a bit more of extension in exchange for something which is very, very musical and very analog and in fact warm sounding. If I connect it to something which is relatively brighter, more neutral, flatter neutral, like this Aune AR5000 here, or even this Hi-Fi-Man Sundara here, and especially when connected to this Hidis MP145 and this extremely resolving and detailed FIO FA19, that is where I really enjoy the sound output. It is definitely very analytical, okay, and yet, especially when with this FA19, this N3 Ultra was able to impart the kind of smoothness which helped the balanced amateur of this FA19 to sound really organic. So if you were to observe, if you have watched my review on this FA19, it scores pretty much almost perfect on every area except for timbre. It scores only 3 out of 5 for the timbre. The sound itself became more akin to kind of like, dynamic driver kind of timbre. So that is super impressive. So what I'm trying to say here is that if you want smoothness to your IEM or headphone, and if you feel that your listening device kind of a bit bright, you want a bit more of musicality, then perhaps you should consider something like this, the classic tube experience as offered by N3 Ultra.